MJ Rosenberg is a senior foreign policy fellow at Media Matters Action Network. He's written lying about the Gaza Flotilla attack. So first, MJ, I want to talk about the right wing saying, hey, you know what, these guys were trying to break the blockade, so they had it coming.
Well, I think of course, that's true. Their intention was to break the blockade. But there's nothing wrong with that. The blockade is illegal. The Israelis have absolutely no right to deny the basic goods that people need to live, and to deny them to a population of 1 million in Gaza. So it's not only appropriate, it's entirely right that these humanitarian workers and religious people and whatever they are, that they would try to bring the supply in, but more importantly, to break the blockade. The blockade is totally illegal. What's the origins of the blockade? The blockade came from as a result of the Palestinian elections. The United States demanded that the Palestinians conduct a free and fair election in Gaza and the West Bank. And guess what? Hamas won the election. And Gaza and the West Bank split off, and Gaza stayed with the Hamas as their leadership. Ever since then, we have been blockading that land. It's just purely the Israelis are demanding it, saying that we're going to punish them, we're going to break their backs. And as one of the leading Israeli politicians said, we're going to put the Gazans on a diet. And that's what the whole thing's about. So yes, the intention was to deliver the goods, but more important is to break the illegal blockade.
Now, the point you make about democracy is a very good one, because almost every single article I've read so far says Hamas violently seized the Gaza Strip. I was like, wait a minute, they won the election. There was violence because the Fatah wanted to overthrow them, and they were backed by largely America and Israel.
Right.
So what do you mean they violently seized the Gaza Strip? So, because that's inconvenient for us, MJ. We don't like that they won in that democracy. So we're going to go ahead and ignore that. But, so I appreciate that point. What did you said that it's an illegal blockade. Why do you think it's an illegal blockade?
Well, I mean, one country does not have the right to blockade another territory or another country simply because they don't like its form of government. The fact of the matter is that what Israel says is we are blockading them to prevent weapons from going through. And if, in fact, that was true, there could be a legitimate case could be made. That means you inspect what goes into that land, into that territory, and make sure no weapons go through. Okay, but the Israelis don't let anything go through. The only thing they allow to go through are the basic foodstuffs that people need to live. In other words, the same politician I quoted who said we want to put them on a diet, the Gazans on a diet, he also said, but we don't want to kill them. So that explains why they ban children's toys. They ban wheelchairs. The Economist magazine this week had a list of the various spices. How the Israelis determine that coriander cannot come in, but nutmeg can come in. This is just designed to punish the Palestinians of Gaza for making a choice that the Israelis don't approve of. But, that doesn't bother me. I mean, Israel can do what it wants to do. I mean, whether I support it or not is not relevant. The thing that bothers me is that the Israelis insist the United States support this blockade. And the United States and in the last couple of days, the United States is the only major country in the world that has not attacked this awful attack on the high seas. And Joe Biden today said he saw absolutely nothing wrong with what the Israelis did. I mean, this is the White House. You would think, President Obama made such a great effort with his Cairo speech. We know that he's sympathetic. We know that he understands what's going on with Israel and the Palestinians, but he hasn't been able to get it together to say anything forceful. I think it's a really sad state of affairs when a liberal president of the United States, one I voted for and admire and in fact love, takes a position on this humanitarian situation that is well to the right of the Conservative Party of Great Britain. The Conservative Prime Minister denounced the blockade today and said it has to be ended. Total silence from the liberal Democratic President of the United States.
All right, MJ, I want to quote from the list you put in your article. Here are some of the things that are prohibited to coming into the Gaza Strip. Ginger, nutmeg, canned fruit, dried fruit, fresh meat, seeds and nuts, fishing rods, ropes for fishing, fabric for clothing, chicken hatcheries, chickens, donkeys, horses, goats, cattle, musical instruments, newspapers, wood for construction, etc. Now, it appears that Israel is not letting everything in, as they claim. But I want to understand a little bit more about the mechanics behind that. Because from time to time they've claimed, oh, if the ship wanted to just come on in, we would have accepted their goods.
Well, that's what Joe Biden said today. He said, why didn't they let the Israelis just inspect the goods and let the stuff in? Well, had they done that, the Israelis would apply this list and would have pulled out everything that's not approved, which means any children's toy, Elmo. All kids love Elmos. Gaza kids love Elmo just as much as American kids. Elmo, forget it. Toss him to the side. He's not allowed in. I mean, the idea that the Israelis are going to permit these goods through now when they haven't allowed this stuff go through for 3 years is ridiculous. We know what's going on there. It's intentional to make the people of Gaza suffer. They have to pay the price for having voted wrong in that election. That's what it's all about.
And what's their, and one other little detail actually before I get to why they do this. Sometimes how they let the stuff sit there for, it's not like they can just pull the ship into the Gaza Strip. They go, okay, no Elmo, no canned fruit, no this. Okay, now you get the rest of it right away. What happens instead? Where do they take the ship, and sometimes how long does it take for some of the goods that they allow in to finally get to the Gaza Strip?
Well, the goods come in mostly through land crossings, and they're just held at these terminals for as long as the Israelis want to hold them. Also it's a two-way thing. There are also exports that are going from Gaza to the rest of the world. Gaza has an agricultural economy. Gaza is particularly, grows flowers and, all kinds of plant life that they like to ship to Europe. What the Israelis like to do is just when they get to the terminal area between Gaza and Israel and the rest of the world, they let the stuff rot. In other words, I mean, there's absolutely nothing flows through easily. Hillary Clinton, when she made a visit to Israel last year, and she went to the Israelis and said, "And what exactly is the reason baked macaroni can't go in?" Because there were cases and cases of baked macaroni that was sent in by religious groups, not baked macaroni, Kraft macaroni in boxes, and the Israelis didn't let it go through until it had rotted and couldn't be used for anything. I mean, there's no intelligent rationale for it. It's just kind of like the kind of nastiness that one people can perpetrate upon another, and it's gotten much worse since Netanyahu came to power.
All right, so MJ, let's talk about why they're doing it. And we're talking to MJ Rosenberg. He's a senior foreign policy fellow for Media Matters Action Network, and he's written about this on many occasions about this issue. So what's their point? Is it that if we crush their spirit enough, they'll say, okay, you win, we will submit to your will, and we will no longer be with Hamas, but we will be with what, and what does that accomplish?
The Israelis want Fatah, the Mahmoud Abbas's organization, the what we call the mainstream Palestinian organization that controls the West Bank. They want Abbas and Saddam Fayyad and his people to control Gaza and the West Bank. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them wanting that, except that it's not their decision. The reason they much prefer Fatah is because they believe, probably correctly, that Fatah and Abbas is much more likely to accept a really bad peace deal, a peace deal that allows the settlers to stay or something like that, than Hamas would. So what they want to do is put enough pressure on the Palestinians of Gaza so that they turn on that government, overthrow it, and bring Fatah back. Well, that's not going to happen in a million years. One of the reasons they got rid of Fatah was it was so corrupt. They didn't choose Hamas because they were voting for terrorists. They chose Hamas because they thought Fatah was totally corrupt and riddled with bribery. But the point is, there are very few instances in history where you can break a people's will by having an outside country bombing them or punishing them. I mean, even when we bombed, incessant bombing of North Vietnam back in the 1960s and 70s, we didn't break their will. We make people rally behind their government if their government is being attacked by outsiders. There are no Palestinians who are going to turn against Hamas because the Israelis are putting the pressure on. What the Israeli government is doing is radicalizing the Palestinian population. And the thing that's really, really sad about it, and I have to say as someone who's been pro-Israel and involved with Israel my whole life, is that in the Palestinian people, Israel is fortunate enough from their point of view to have people very similar to them, modern and secular for the most part, and mainly interested in having a business and making a life. But the Israeli blockade and Israel's and on the West Bank, the checkpoints, the whole business of oppression of the Palestinian population has radicalized them. The Israelis themselves created Hamas. And at this rate, we're going to have Hamas supplanted by Al-Qaeda. It's almost as if the Israelis are trying to adopt policies that are most designed to drive the Palestinians into toward the most extremist forces. I don't understand what they're doing, but it seems like the Netanyahu right-wing group has taken over from the more centrists in Israel, and they are hell-bent to crush the will of the Gaza Palestinians.
So, MJ, you said Hamas was created by Israel. Do you mean figuratively or literally?
I mean literally. That they were created by Israel. Well, let me put it this way. They existed. They existed in the West Bank and Gaza. They were the Palestinian version of the Muslim Brotherhood. But they were not particularly political. They didn't get involved with the struggle for a Palestinian state. They were more involved with Islamic issues. They weren't a political force. The political force at that time was Yasser Arafat's PLO. He was the one who was putting Israel under pressure to negotiate. Remember, in 1988, the PLO under Arafat announced that it would accept Israel within the 67 borders. At about that time, Israel said, uh-oh, this is going to put us on the spot. Let's weaken Arafat by building up the more religious folks, building up what we now call Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood. They won't be a problem because they'll just stick to their praying and their religious books, and they won't put the pressure on us that Arafat will. So it didn't work out quite that way. What happened was they empowered Hamas. What they did was they ostracized Arafat's people. They made sure that Arafat's people wouldn't get any money that would be coming through Israel. Everything would be going to the Hamas Muslim Brotherhood types. But it turned out that the Hamas became radicalized, became political, and became the effective force it now is. But they literally made the choice to deal with Hamas, that they preferred Hamas to Yasser Arafat.
But MJ, everything you say here leads to a fairly obvious conclusion, which is that they never really wanted the peace deal from the get-go. When Arafat wanted the 1967 borders, that's when they panicked. They didn't want that peace deal. And everything they've done since then has radicalized the Palestinians so that they could then turn around and say, they're radicals, I can't deal with them. Huh?
Well, I think that's true. I think, though, the most significant event, and probably the event that makes it almost impossible that peace will be achieved anytime soon, was the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. Rabin made the peace deal with Arafat. I'm not sure he intended to go the whole way with it. I mean, he was, as you know, he was a fairly hawkish guy himself. But by the time of his death, he was quoted as saying, both publicly and to his wife, that Arafat is my partner. I can cut a deal with him. I think, the last day of Rabin's life, the last minutes of his life, he was up there on the stage at a peace rally, a leftist peace rally in Tel Aviv, singing the Israeli peace anthem, which is called the Song of Peace, which is basically about how all people can live together. As he's walking out of that rally, he's shot dead by a radical Jewish settler who wanted to stop the peace process. And essentially, it worked. It was the most successful assassination, I think, ever in history. From the point of view of the assassin got what he wanted. And I really think that, we all knew it was a terrible tragedy when Rabin was assassinated. You might recall that Yasser Arafat had never gone into Israel itself up to that point. He'd been in Jerusalem, but he had gone to Tel Aviv. He went to Tel Aviv to go to the home of Mrs. Rabin to personally express his grief. I think that the Palestinian leadership understood at that point this probably was the end of the game. It was going to go from bad to worse. And interesting, it's worth pointing out that when there were two major assassinations that had to do with the peace process in the Middle East in his history. One was the assassination of Sadat. He was assassinated by militants for having signed the peace treaty with Israel. He was assassinated. Mubarak, no great prize, but Mubarak takes over, becomes the president of Egypt. He keeps the peace treaty. Why? Because the peace treaty was signed by Egypt, and it was still binding. So the peace treaty stays in effect. For 30 years, no gun has been fired in anger between those two countries. In Israel, on the other hand, Rabin is assassinated. Netanyahu becomes prime minister a few months later and repudiates the peace treaty. And the irony in it is that Israel always says, how can you make a deal with the Arabs? You never know when one of them's going to get assassinated and repudiate the peace. But that's what happened with Israel, and it's the opposite of what happened with Egypt. But I really think that the key terrible moment in this whole history was Rabin's assassination. I really do. I think it might have been different. I'm not saying I'm giving up hope completely, but I think you're going to need a Rabin to come along on the Israeli side. And I think that Rabin will have to come along and say, we'll deal with Fatah, but we're going to deal with Hamas too. The fact is, cutting a deal only with Fatah will not stick. If you don't bring the radicals in, the radicals subvert the peace.
All right, MJ, we're out of time. I gotta have you back on because I got 100 more questions for you. And the reality is, of course, this all doesn't. In my mind, I shouldn't say the reality. In my opinion, it doesn't turn on the leader of the Palestinians or the leader of the Israelis. It turns on the leader of the United States.
Oh, I definitely agree with that.
and if we don't have a strong leadership that says, "Hey, I'm going to get a peace deal done, and I'm going to get it done for Israel, whether the current government of Israel likes it or not," we're not going to get that deal unless we have a guy who's willing to step out on the line and do that. And right now, it doesn't appear we have that guy.
I agree with you 100%. I thought we did have it, but right now I'm very disappointed.
Yep. MJ Rosenberg from Media Matters Action Network. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.